Welcome back from Delta Y. This week we'll be talking about
India shooting down one of their national satellites and how that may have detrimental effects for orbital and space travel.
and a new study on screen time before bed and how it could affect teenagers or not.
As always, I'm Grayson.
This is Josh, and welcome to Delta Y.
Alright, so the first thing we're going to be talking about today is India's destruction of one of its own satellites. So, this was happening during the presidential election or prime minister election for Narendra Modi. He announced the success of what they call Mission Shakti, a missile test that destroyed one of the nation's own satellites. Now, normally when people hear about the destruction of a satellite, it happens as the satellite decays in orbit and it crashes down to Earth, whether that be in the ocean or on some form of a landmass.
Or often, they come down into orbit and they'll burn up because the surface area size of the satellite versus its drag coefficient tends to slow it down so much that the heat
fire
of its angle of re-entry just incinerates it.
Pretty much.
They can't control that. I mean, some countries do control them with thrusters. The U.S. and Russia in particular have been known to use thrusters to throw their vehicle into such an angle of departure from orbit that it incinerates itself.
Yeah, however, both Russia, the U.S., and China as well have now been... They all have taken part in this act of shooting a missile into space and destroying a satellite. India is now one of the 4 countries that has done this, and is extreme. It poses extreme dangers for the future of space travel in general.
Well, the trick here is that China, they did this in 2007, but they shot a satellite down those 537 miles in orbit, which is much higher. So you're going to be shooting something that, yes, the debris is there, but that debris circle is outside of danger zones for, the ISS and other manned travel to space at this time.
No, that's not...
Well, but it also, yes, it does create a debris field.
It does create a debris field, and that debris field can multiply. There are pieces in there that are about the size of a centimeter, flying at roughly 30,000 miles a second around the Earth, and they can have the energy of a bomb. They can have the kinetic energy of a bomb, and if it hits something, it will explode. And for something like space travel, if this sort of thing keeps up, like the Indian government cites that I think it was some sort of defense initiative. However, this is more harmful in the long run because if they continue to do stuff like this, it will essentially create a debris field around the Earth that will prevent space travel.
Yeah, and the trick here is that the big worry is of the Kessler syndrome, which would create domino effect of collisions, which I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Gravity, but that's exactly what happened in that movie. When you have a destruction of one piece of space equipment, it cascades through because one satellite can create so many tiny pieces of debris that can just incinerate. Well, I shouldn't say incinerate, but just destroy other satellites.
Yeah, it just goes around. One piece becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 8 becomes 16, and it just keeps multiplying to the point where we can't even launch a single rocket into space, be that SpaceX, Blue Origin, or NASA, to the point where we can't do that. So we will, and it'll take like a couple hundred years, a couple 100,000 years for that to die down, for the debris field to slowly fall to Earth and burn up.
Theoretically, there is some debris that, be that in low Earth orbit or high Earth orbit, either of those have, both low and high Earth orbit have debris fields currently, be from GPS or GLONASS satellites or manned space missions, such as like Hubble and the ISS. Like, the ISS does not have an infinite amount of time left.
No.
It is a decaying structure that, NASA themselves have said, I believe it's not even like a decade or 2 more they're going to be manning it because they do have worries of the low Earth orbit debris field, coming in contact with it. Yeah. And the trick here is that, yes, this is a problem, but it's a bigger problem than some people think because if we have a debris field that coagulates, around us, we can't launch anything into space. That be GPS, satellites, military, environmental, any type of satellite you need to launch, you wouldn't be able to launch it. The rocket would pretty much just shred itself as it went up at such high speeds.
Now, are GPS and military satellites, are they in that low Earth orbit field the same as the debris field that would be created by the Kessler syndrome? I don't
So
remember.
You can have a Kessler syndrome in both orbits. So there's such thing as low Earth orbit, which is where the ISS, Hubble, and some other bigger satellites sit.
Okay, but the higher Earth orbit is where like the military and GPS and a bunch of other commercial satellites for stuff like telecommunications arrays and whatnot.
Yeah, so GPS has an array that is much higher than the ISS. They're in a high Earth orbit. And the trick with some military satellites are high Earth orbit, some are low Earth. Often low Earth orbit, from my understanding, is low Earth orbit is reserved for, like, think of like Google Maps, their imaging software. That's where those low Earth satellites come into play with his high resolution imagery. Now, India shot this down in low Earth orbit, technically. So it's technically low Earth orbit. It's a weird boundary layer that is, it's like the definition of where space is. It changes from country to country. Same thing between low and high Earth orbit from country to country changes.
And
this was in the orbit kind of in the same region as the ISS.
Yeah, and they're saying the Indian government is saying that, these pieces will fall down in the coming weeks or months. But simulations, I think, from both China and America have shown that that's not going to be the case. And these pieces of debris may be staying up there for a couple years, if not longer, which can pose a danger to the ISS.
Yeah, and they have estimated now that, NASA's and the U.S. Strategic Command for Combined Space Operations Center have shown that there's a 44% increase in risk to the ISS in the 10 days following this destruction.
Jeez.
And so that's a huge risk. I mean, there's already a huge risk being in space. You can get one pinhole in the ISS and the thing will implode. Like, implode, explode. I actually don't remember which one happens. I've watched it.
Well, it's going to be a decomposition. It's like
a depressurization.
Yeah, so it'll either it'd flatten, right?
Yeah, it'd be an implosion, I believe.
Well, more or less. I mean,
unless you hit a canister tank, which would explode.
Well, if you crush it, it's going to have a canister tank in there, so there's probably going to be an implosion and an explosion.
Essentially, but like what I'm saying here is, the tiniest amount of debris could destroy the ISS. Space is a delicate place, and I think that a lot of these newer, because India's space industry is not old; it's relatively new, isn't it?
Yeah, it's this is the first time that I actually ever heard of them launching something in, like, my own just day-to-day interaction with the news. I had never known that India even had a space program before this.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out when they were or when they were created.
So it's like
they were created in 1969, but I don't think they've had a launch.
Like they're planning a manned mission for 2021. I think it's something I read. Yeah,
and their first satellite looks like was built in 1975 by the Soviet Union, or launched by the Soviet Union. So they've been around, but I don't think they've had as much experience as NASA has had. We learned so much from the Apollo program, and we're learning so much now from the SLS program that I think that this sort of thing, we understand the gravity of this situation where some other countries,
no pun intended,
where some other countries may not understand how extreme this is, which is why like China and the US are both working on things that aren't explosive to take out satellites, such as lasers, harpoons, and nets. And, a lot of private companies are getting on that too. I believe SpaceX has teased that they're working on something that, like, will grab a satellite, pull it in, and throw it down.
Well, my problem that is very cool, but my issue would probably be that field, because you're talking about the Kessler syndrome, and if they have to keep track of all these little pieces of debris, and they have to warn people, hey, this thing is on a trajectory to hit this satellite. You either have to evacuate or prep something else to be launched soon. I'd actually find it way cooler if instead of taking down the satellites, we could still be fine with taking down satellites the normal way of just having them burn up in the atmosphere. But if we can get rid of that debris field in a measurable manner, I don't know if they'd have to have some space age form of Kevlar or something that can catch these high kinetic energy pieces of debris. But if we can do that, we can practically eliminate the threat of a Kessler syndrome altogether.
And I think that the goal, of a lot of agencies is to reduce the amount of space debris, because I believe NASA tracks almost all the space debris, because they have to monitor if any of it ever could possibly, they have to do trajectory calculations on this every day for, is this debris have what percentage of chance of hitting the ISS, Hubble, or any other of their major satellites that they operate known. Because those are multi-trillion-dollar endeavors that they can't just rebuild. They don't have any money. So,
yeah.
I mean, they're constantly, so it throws them a wrench in their system where now they have to track thousands and thousands of new pieces of debris all of which they have to sit there. And, I mean, this takes time to calculate what the trajectory of that piece is.
Around the orbit of the Earth, yeah.
Yeah, and, I mean, orbit of the Earth is... It's a calculatable thing. It's not, like, impossible. But it's, very hard to actually track this. Now, obviously, with modern computers, it's not too bad to figure out what goes wrong. But, like, when you watch the simulation in the article of this video, this debris field, yes, it's relatively contained into one patch, but there's so many tiny pieces shooting off.
It's kind of like a shotgun. It's basically just going to... Even if that patch still remains, it's eventually going to start spreading out.
Yeah. And, like, if you watch the simulation, it essentially... Earth does have a ring, essentially, like Saturn, except it's made up of trash. That's the trick here. No, and I'm serious. It has not even a ring. We have like a bubble around us made up of trash, which currently, at our rate right now, isn't bad. But in 40 years, if we see the acceleration of space travel like we saw in the Cold War era, with the colonization of Mars, this space field we're gonna start to see it. That's the problem.
Like from Earth.
Well, I mean, not necessarily from Earth, because we have so much atmosphere we can't actually see stuff in space.
Well, I mean, with a telescope.
Yeah,
maybe.
But like, it'll create a problem where you could only launch a spacecraft once in a year because you have to find a
specific
hole.
Window. Yeah,
yeah, and that's the biggest problem with this, and that's why I'm excited to see what these space agencies come up with to solve this.
Yeah,
because we have to find ways to take debris either out of orbit or project it into actual space outside of our orbit.
And I think that's actually what I was getting at, was the importance of doing that over finding a better way to remove the satellites. Because if the Kessler syndrome were to accelerate the amount of debris, say, today, we wouldn't have satellites to worry about to take down, because they would already be destroyed.
Yeah, and I mean, if the satellite network hit a Kessler syndrome, either high orbit or low orbit, we could either lose all GPS on Earth.
Military satellites, intelligence satellites,
everything high
arrays.
orbit, we could lose that in a day. Or we could lose everything low Earth in a day. All research satellites, imaging satellites, a lot of telecommunication satellites, everything we depend on. We could lose either or both in a day or two just because someone shot something they weren't supposed to.
Yeah.
That's why, space weapons are banned, because they don't want to have countries, destroying satellites in space, because I think that the U.S. and the Soviet Union back in the day realized the problem. If you're constantly blowing crap up in space, it's in the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, to be fair, orbital weapons do look kind of cool for a sci-fi concept.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think that, kinetic energy weapons aren't dangerous because there's no propellant involved. There's nothing involved in those.
Well, I mean, they are dangerous for our economy, though. They have to be like tungsten rods or something completely dense to even get to near nuclear levels of devastation, if that's what the military prefers.
I mean, if you shoot from low Earth orbit with I think it's a 25-foot tungsten rod with a 1-foot diameter, it creates a blast radius with the kinetic energy it gains from the travel down to Earth to level LA.
LA? What the heck is that?
Los Angeles.
Oh, geez.
I believe that was a calculation I read once. So they're incredibly powerful, but they are banned internationally.
Good.
But the problem is there's some countries that don't always follow the rules, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, don't worry. North Korea's not getting a space age program. They're just too busy with their nukes right now.
That wasn't where I was going with that. The other one in that area, which we don't like to create political discussions here.
Yeah.
But I think we know what country I'm talking about, which is, just spacefaring countries. Some of them know their responsibility. NASA's a research organization. They have specifically said their fundamental theory is not weapons, it's exploration. Yeah. But, some other countries I don't think have fully committed to the route they're going on, and we could see weaponization of space in the next decade to 2 decades to 3 decades from some of these countries that are new into space that don't necessarily always follow international law. But, I am happy that, we're coming up with new solutions. It's definitely going to be interesting to follow this debris field from the India satellite to see what happens to it. I really hope and pray that the ISS is safe and, everyone on board is safe. And, I hope that nothing too bad happens from this,
Yes.
but it's definitely something to follow to see,
what exactly is going to become of the situation, just in general, whether the debris field kind of dissipates, or if the debris field does intend to pose a danger to the ISS or other satellite or research arrays within our orbit.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, with that, we might as well get back on to the next article that we've got.
Which is a new study from the Association for Psychological Science, which has found that data from more than 17,000 teenagers had little to no evidence that the screen time before bed and well-being had any relation. So the idea is that, in the past, we've all been told by our parents, don't stare at your phone, don't get too close to TV, don't use your screen before bed. And I think that their theory was, if you're doing that, you're going to, widen your... Okay, you got to help me out here with eye science. It's your cones?
Cones. Okay, so rods help with intensity. Cones help with eye color, like wavelength differentiation. So it's cones. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
So you'd be exciting your eye, you'd be blinding it with such light that when you close your eyes to go to bed, your eye is still readjusting, which is gonna help keep you from falling asleep faster.
Well, see, I
think that's what our parents thought.
Well,
but this
that's not
study
even
showed,
what our parents thought. That's what I was taught in a psychology class, that it triggers that. Okay, so your eyes are receptive to red, green, and blue light.
Mm-hmm.
Green is the highest wavelength that we can read. However, red and blue trigger some kind of chemical response to help us sleep and wake up. That's why when you have, let's say, seasonal affective disorder, people recommend you use a blue light in the morning rather than at night, because the blue light at night will wake you up and keep you awake. That's why we also have these nightlight filters, which turns things red, which, or in the opposite sense, they help you fall asleep.
Or in the case of some phones have a blue light filter, which filters out blue lights into yellows.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about that.
It's the certain sides of the color spectrum that will keep you either awake or help you fall asleep.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of biology to be known about this, because I'm not entirely sure of the mechanism. I haven't really reread anything from my psych textbook that I got in high school, but there's a thing called the suprachiasmatic nucleus that helps regulate sleep. Any form of light, even through your eyelids, if that reaches your eyes, it can stimulate and trigger that suprachiasmatic nucleus in your brain to wake you up. And that also can screw with your circadian rhythm.
Which is, I think, the big idea that people had behind this was, if you're screwing up your circadian sleep rhythm,
mm-hmm.
you're not going to sleep as well, you're going to have less sleep, it's going to affect your growth. It's just a cascading effect, essentially, is what they were thinking. But, this study, what they found in, 17,000 teenagers, and it was mostly focused in Ireland and the UK, and there was a small, under 1,000, surveyed teenagers in the US. But what they found is that the notion of spending time online, like gaming and watching TV before bedtime, had no correlation, really, to the health.
Like the mental health of it.
Yeah, the mental health and just the general well-being of teenagers.
Well, okay, I can see well-being being more for a psychological association, be like watching for depression, anxiety, a lot of other stuff having to do with the mind. However, I'm still certain that the jury is in on that eyesight in the dark can be affected with bright lights, like digital screen time in the dark at night, like the photo in the article. We'll link all the articles down below. We have one from Engadget for the India launch, or the India's launching or shooting down its satellite, and for this one as well from Science Daily. So those, I think that those two will in fact, what am I trying to say?
It's the thought that, it's the notion of thought here that, people working in a dark room with bright screens, we've been doing that for decades as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we've seen a correlation. I honestly think that this is something that would take multiple decades to research, to see, if one generation does it, as based off our parents. Personally, I sleep more than my parents do, and I think I get more sleep than they do. But that's just because, they're older, and they they don't go to bed as early because they stay up and they read. But I think the study here is, I'm also thinking of this and seeing this like, hey, is me reading before bed, like an actual physical book, as bad or as, undetrimental to my health as, taking out like a Kindle and reading? Are those two things equal in, danger towards mental health? Or at the same time, I guess, not equal? I think it's really what this article's trying to get at is that it's not really using your screen or doing anything before bed. It's lack of sleep that really harms people. And that, I think, is the difference here is that, it's not a, we're too busy, we're always on our phones notion of our generation. It's a focus thing of our generation where
we lack it. We lack
a lot of focus. We lack, and a lot of our generation, I'm saying our generation, we're in our early 20s, doesn't get enough sleep because we're always attached to our phones.
Yeah, I kind of think that's also the phone use, the technology use in general has also been a huge part of just the focus in general. Not because of all the social media, but just because it's addictive. It's you spend what's the average time that a person spends on TV? Like 4 hours a week, 4 hours a day, or 4 hours a week, or something like that.
Yeah, and like I think that it's not TV anymore. It's a big problem. It's the internet.
Yeah,
because like I hardly ever watch actual. I don't even have my TV hooked up to an actual TV. I have a Chromecast in it because I just use the internet. But like the amount of time I spend watching TV shows or like movies and stuff a week is not that much. It's like the amount of time I sit browsing Reddit or scrolling through Instagram. It's that kind of stuff that really throws me off. And my dad always in high school and even now he'll text me or be like, "Are you focusing on classes?" Like he knows that me and like our entire generation has a predisposition to just sit there and do anything but what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest problem here is, you spend, 4 or 5 hours a week on your TV. That's 30 minutes a day, 30 to 45 minutes a day. That's not that bad.
Well,
that's coming back after classes, relaxing, watching some TV.
Well, add that all up together, you get something like maybe 10, 12 days total. You've wasted essentially 12 days of your life on a technology that, in the end, has no bearing on your life.
Exactly, and I totally, I think you're totally on the point there, is that, I wouldn't say, technically we're wasting our lives, because not a lot of us, come back and, like, do stuff immediately. A lot of us like to relax. And
well, here's the thing, though, like, what, you could be doing so much more effective stuff, like reading, for example, like you were talking about, like reading. You could be doing that, or you could be progressing in your professional development for 40 minutes, trying to read a new article or trying to help learn a new skill, maybe learn a new coding language, for example, rather than spending time online, because that's also been shown, like social media has been shown to be the number one greatest increase in anxiety for almost every generation that uses it.
I totally agree with you there, and that's definitely a measurable fact. And I think that, this is a really touchy subject, really, for our generation, is that, we just have become, I don't want to say, the connectedness of our world now and of our generation is amazing.
It's amazing, but no one would have anticipated it like 20 years ago or 40 years ago.
That, and I think at times the connectedness we have, not only to each other but to just the internet, is becoming slowly and slowly more detrimental to our health. And just not there's that, but also to our brains. Like, are we all going to stay in college or go to college or get some sort of trade degree or anything like that that's useful to the economy? No, not everyone gets a technology degree or a science degree or
some kind of mathematics or any kind of STEM major in
or
any
really
way.
Any kind of degree that you can market yourself with and make money. I think that anything you can market yourself with and make money is important.
Well, you can do that with journalism. You can do that with English. You can do that with it.
But what I'm saying here is that I think that we're in the problem area of we might be seeing a decline in our generation, and younger than us, kids in high school and grade school right now. I'm worried for them as they'll grow up. Are they having too much screen? Did they sit on iPads too much as kids? Did they stunt themselves from the get-go by relying too much on technology?
Well, I think that's also another thing that, I feel like we're getting off topic, but I'll touch on it quick here, that with the advent of the internet, there's a greater dearth of information that we can actually access now without the need for like MIT's Open Courseware. They have tons of textbooks and video lectures from well-known professors. I think they even have Mark Zuckerberg, or no, that's probably Harvard or whatever. Harvard. Mark Zuckerberg does Harvard's CS50 lecture online for free. Like, you don't have to attend Harvard to do something like that. I think that is a huge draw in terms of, like, the education aspect, but I'm getting off topic there.
Mm-hmm. I think really we should, wrap this up and just kind of keep with the baseline here that, yes, we have a generation and just humanity in general has become more and more attached to the internet, more and more attached to the notion of being connected, but we've become attached to the notion of being connected in a non-physical world. Right, it's a digital world where I think that we need to get back on track with creating the connections that are of the physical world, so that that's where I think a lot of development comes from, is that physical connections of humanity.
Yeah,
and I think that yes, the online connectedness, when Facebook started, that was great. We were able to connect online. You get to know new people, and you can meet them in real life. But I think that as we've moved on in life, we're following people on Instagram, friending people on, I shouldn't say friending people on Facebook. I don't think anyone my age uses Facebook for normal Facebook.
After
things.
all the stuff that's happened with Facebook, probably not.
I just use it to sell stuff. But like social media, we become connected to people on social media without being connected to people in real life.
Yeah, and
we're not growing connections in real life that we're growing on social media.
Yeah, and I think not just for social media, but just for the internet in general, I'm trying to just disconnect myself as much as possible, just because of all the even though the article that we're citing is saying that it doesn't have a detrimental effect, I'm just doing it anyway. I'm trying to disconnect myself as much as possible. It's hard, very hard for college students to do something like that, since a lot of our coursework is online, a lot of our textbooks, a lot of our material, and a lot of helpful information is online. But I'm just trying to make an effort at it to not be as connected, just so that way I think it's better for my mental health overall, from what I've seen.
I agree. I mean, I think that if we're able to I agree with this article. It's not something that is detrimental to our health as much. We're not going to see, it's just the screen time. I think that it's more just articles we read in the news or things we see on social media is really what is detrimental to our generation that we have to watch out for. And I definitely think that, a lot of people should take a day or two a month and just kind of disconnect.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could still, I think that texting and calling people is fine because you're connected to people that is a connection, and that's important to have a lot in the world. You almost couldn't, it's impossible. Email, call, and text, I think, are three fundamental things that run the world nowadays.
Yeah.
But I think that, certain news outlets and, certain online social media platforms they foster you to stay inside instead of getting out and talking to people and knowing people. And that is what I think is the fundamental problem of the world right now, is that we have to be able to limit ourselves online, not in terms of screen time, but in terms of how we're connecting to people online, which is way off course from what we were originally talking about. I understand, but I thought this was a good time to bring that up, as we could connect it to something we had been talking about.
Yeah, I know that a lot of the stuff that we're covering right now is very digital. There's a lot of stuff on graphene. I know we've done a ton of articles on graphene, talked about a bunch about that new technology, and that's going to allow for greater processing power, and then that's going to probably increase the amount of time that just overall a faster computer would be able to allow for more time to process information, because it's I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's
we'd be stuck more because we'd have a faster phone, so we'd be I'm not waiting for my phone, I'm gonna do something else. I'm not waiting for my computer to run something, I'm gonna do something else. We're gonna get stuck into, I'm on a computer, I have to run the simulation, I have to run this processing of an image, it, done, I can get right back on my computer.
Yeah, I remember this one thing from this show called *Halt and Catch Fire*. It was based in the 80s, about people trying to create their own computer, trying to be a competitor to IBM, and they talk about some weird constant. I forget what it is, but it's some psychological thing where it's it's taking too long. I might as well focus on something else entirely that's more important than this computer task. And they'd be right. A faster computer does allow for more retention, and that goes for that's why we optimize a lot of the software that we use that's for entertainment, like social media.
We want speed in our generation. I think that's a big problem. We like to have things fast, But at certain times, having something, like my phone freezes every once in a while,
Mm-hmm.
and then I sit there and go, oh, this stupid thing, like, I want to, like, make it faster, but at the same time, I'm like, wait, I can step back, I can read part of the book I was going to read, or, like, I can do this part of, like, something else. Like, I can pick something else to do, and I think that having something, just slow down every once in a while is really important to see, what's going on and how we can definitely, engage ourselves a little more with the physical world.
All right, well, with that, I think we should probably wrap up this week's episode.
I totally agree. I think we've gone on a little bit long about this, but I think it was important to go on about it.
Yeah, definitely. Long story short, read more, try and disconnect as much as possible, and stay just connected with the physical world as much as you can.
And call your parents every once in a while.
That too.
Yeah, anyway, as always, I'm Josh.
I'm Grayson.
This is Delta Y. Make sure to follow us down below on our social media. We're not super active. We have very busy lives, unfortunately, due to school and different things we do. But, we do try to get on there every once in a while, and we appreciate everything you guys, any support you guys can give us.
We'll put the links down below for all the articles that we referenced, and please make sure to comment if you have any suggestions on how to improve the show or your thoughts on what we were talking about today.
As always, I'm Josh.
I'm Grayson. Stay creative, and we will see you all next time.